This is Murder by Cheesecake, a Golden Girls cozy mystery by Rachel Ekstrom Courage. Chapter 1, Coffee and Catastrophe. Rose Nyland whispered into the lemony yellow telephone receiver, twisting the cord tightly between her fingers, her words obscured by the gurgling of the coffee percolator. The aroma of toast and melting butter filled the kitchen as the early Florida sunlight filtered through the ruffled curtains above the sink. "Who's that you're talking to, Rose?" Blanche called in her languid southern drawl as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "A new beau?" Rose hung up the handset with a clatter and smoothed the floral robe. "Oh, it was just one of those prank calls." "For 20 minutes?" Sophia piped up from the breakfast table, her small face framed by the scallop collar of her nightgown. "I've had dates that ended quicker than that." Blanche stifled a giggle as she carried her mug over to the table, seating herself with a swirl of chiffon and a white bamboo chair. "When was that, back in the 1800s? Dorothy said as she swept into the kitchen, already dressed for the day in a flowing cream blazer, beige slacks, and chunky gold earrings. "Exactly, right after you were born," Sophia said, her sharp tones softened by the twinkle behind her large bifocal lenses. Dorothy reached for a banana from the fruit bowl on the kitchen island, ignoring her mother's barb. She leaned against the old cabinet, noticing Rose's worried expression. "What's the problem, Rose?" she said kindly. "Well, I'd rather not say," Rose said, dipping her head. "Don't worry, honey, we won't pry," Blanche said. She leaned forward and peered over the rim of her coffee cup, as if she very much wanted to pry. "Well, if you're going to drag it out of me," Rose said, settling herself at the table between Sophia and Blanche, "I can't keep it all cooped up inside for much longer." "That's never a good idea," Sophia said sagely. "Just ask my gastroenterologist." "It's clear something is bothering you," Blanche purred, tilting her head to one side. "I always feel better after I unburden myself." Dorothy opened her mouth, ready to make a wisecrack. She thought better of it and poured herself some coffee before joining the others at the table. "You know how I was going to fly to St. Olaf for a wedding next week? Well, something terrible has happened there," Rose said. She fidgeted with the edge of the tablecloth, wrinkling the abstract leaf pattern between her fingers. "Oh no, is everything all right with your niece, Sweet Pea? Nettie, was it?" Blanche asked, her voice full of concern. She passed a plate of buttered toast to Rose, who usually felt better once she had a snack, especially one involving dairy products. "No, everything is not okay," Rose said. "And technically, Nettie's my cousin. Since I'm closer to her mother's age, she's always called me Aunt Rose. Her mother is my Aunt Greta, and I have a few choice words to say about her, believe me." She released the edge of the tablecloth, leaving it in crumpled pleats. Blanche and Sophia exchanged a knowing glance. In their experience, Rose hardly ever spoke ill of anyone, and whenever she did, the words were lengthy, guttural, and vaguely Norwegian. Dorothy took a fortifying sip of coffee as Rose cleared her throat. "So Nettie's mother is your aunt, but her daughter thinks you're her aunt?" Sophia said. "Got it." "It's more of a term of respect," Rose said, "especially because I helped raise her after her parents ran off to follow their dreams of starting a poodle circus in Pittsburgh. Ever since I've lived in Miami, I've been more like a long-distance surrogate mother to Nettie." "Poor girl," Dorothy said. "She's lucky to have you in her life." "She hasn't had it easy," Rose said, shaking her head. "When my Aunt Greta was pregnant with her, there were terrible rumors that she was actually carrying the Sturgeon General's baby. But when the amazing Shapiro delivered her, it was clear that Nettie was a Lindstrom through and through." Saying that last bit in a voice full of pride, she paused to make sure her friends understood. "Dare I ask," Dorothy said as she joined the others at the table. "What part did you find confusing?" Sophia said, lifting her hands into the air. "The Sturgeon General or the amazing Shapiro?" "They're two completely different people," Rose said, exasperated. "The point is, Nettie just told me there's a problem with holding the wedding in St. Olaf, and they're going to elope instead." "That's young love for you," Blanche said, raising her eyebrows. "Elopements are so romantic. Sneaking out of your window, running away with a handsome man, and pledging your love in a secret gazebo overgrown with wisteria, with only moonlight as your witness." Rose took a sip of coffee, and then placed her mug on the table with a clank, jolting Blanche out of her reverie. "Well, that's not what I had in mind for Nettie. It's been years since we've had such a joyous occasion in the family, and since Nettie is a direct descendant of Heinrich von Adlerhausen, we have lots of serious St. Olaf traditions to uphold. And we must have a real wedding, and there can't be a herring out of place." "But Rose," Dorothy said, reaching across the table to pat her on the arm, "certainly you can convince her." "That's not the whole story," Rose said sadly. "Just this week I read something dreadful in the Courier-Dispatch." She hid her head in her hands for a long moment. The three other women exchanged worried glances over Rose's pale cloud of platinum curls. "I knew something was wrong when she forgot to put mayonnaise in her tuna fish salad yesterday," Sophia muttered under her breath. "I did?" Rose gasped, putting a hand to her chest. Traditionally, mayonnaise was the first ingredient in every dish she made. "I thought maybe it was a butter incident," Sophia quipped, and Dorothy shot her a silencing look. Rose slowly lifted her head. "Not every injustice in St. Olaf is butter-related, Sophia," she said, her voice quivering. "Apparently, the Storslagen Hostel hosted a particularly aggressive Grand S'mores challenge this year." "And?" Sophia said. "Come on, I don't have much time." Don't be so dramatic, Ma, Dorothy said, shaking her head. Her mother seemed to bring up her own mortality more and more these days. You know I hate it when you talk that way. What? I mean, I have a busy schedule today. I have the podiatrist, the optometrist. I'll just take a regular old tryst, Blanche joked, trying to lighten the mood. As I was saying, Rose continued, the Storslagen burned down. It's the only hotel in St. Olaf, and it'll be impossible to hold a big family wedding without a venue or place for everyone to stay. So that's why you've been so worried lately, Dorothy said, remembering that her dear friend has been acting a bit odd recently. Not finishing her cheesecake the other night, muttering to herself when she thought no one was listening, and bringing up wild St. Olaf stories. However, the last part was pretty normal for Rose, Dorothy had to admit. Now Nettie feels her only choice is to elope, Rose said, and she told me she's never been enamored with St. Olaf's vaunted traditions. She bit her lips, staring morosely down their untouched toast. The woman fell silent, and Dorothy stirred her coffee pensively. That is a predicament, Blanche said. Is there a motel in town? Ah, your favorite subject. Sophia peered over her glasses at Blanche. But aren't you the expert? I assume you're intimately acquainted with every motel from here to Tuscaloosa. Very funny, Blanche said, lifting her chin and adjusting the shoulder pads in her chiffon robe. What about the town next door? Can't you find a hotel there, Dorothy asked, ever practical? In the rival hamlet of St. Gustav? Rose said, voice rising in disbelief. I may be desperate, but I'm not foolhardy. She shook her head and looked down at her hands again. Dorothy paused to stifle a smile. Now wasn't the time to bring up Rose's many foolhardy ideas. She was a friend, and Rose was clearly upset. I'm sure there's a solution, she said. Together we can figure it out. Rose lifted her head, her eyes wide with gratitude. You'll really help me? Sophia held up her hands, palms up. What are friends for? She then got up from the table and headed slowly for the door. Unfortunately, I'm not that kind of friend. See you all later. After breakfast, Rose paced in front of the coral-upholstered rattan sofa in the living room, now dressed in a silky teal blouse and skirt. Dorothy and Blanche sat in matching fan-armed chairs on either side, watching with anxious expressions as Rose practically wore a path through the cream-colored carpet with her low-heel pumps. So we can't have the wedding in St. Olaf, but we still have to rigorously adhere to all the St. Olaf traditions, Rose said, clasping her hands and together in intense concentration. After a moment, she unclasped them. I'm drawing a blank. Is it really necessary to be that strict? Dorothy asked. Is it a matter-of-fact tone? It's the 20th century. People get married all sorts of ways. She thought back to her own shock on winning the stand decades ago and frowned. It hadn't exactly been a fairy tale experience, she had to admit. At least she had gotten 2 children out of it, she thought with a bittersweet sigh. First of all, Nettie's fiancé is, well, he's... Rose covered her mouth with her hand as if the truth was too terrible to speak aloud. Her silence allowed Blanche and Dorothy's minds to run wild with exactly what could be wrong with Nettie's fiancé. A secret family in Canada, a history of petty crime, a pet chinchilla for whom he built an elaborate habitat, all would be cause for concern. Spit it out, Rose, Dorothy said, using her intimidating teacher voice. He's an outsider, okay? Rose said with a little bow of her head. He's not from St. Olaf. He's not even from the Midwest. Blanche and Dorothy let out relieved chuckles. Surely the people of St. Olaf aren't that close-minded and provincial anymore, Blanche said. Both Dorothy and Rose gave her a pointed look. Blanche cocked her head to one side. Well, maybe they are, but what's so bad about this young man? He's originally from southern Florida, from Coconut Grove, Rose said. But that's not the issue. Apparently he loves St. Olaf and wants to move back there with Nettie. But his rather tepid throwing of the hay during the last annual hay day, that really disappointed the elders. She placed a delicate hand on her stomach as if the very thought made her a bit queasy. I can see how that would be a problem, Dorothy deadpanned. But if he's from the area, why can't you just host the wedding right here in Miami? Rose stopped in her tracks. Dorothy thought she could literally see the gears, or gear in Rose's case, turn slowly. Now that's an idea, Rose said, pointing to Dorothy as if she'd just gotten the correct answer on The Price is Right. As long as the wedding follows the week-long guidelines to a T, there's nothing in town bylaws that says the event must take place there. And if you all help me, I just know I can make it perfect. Rose let out a little squeal, then grabbed a turquoise throw pillow from the sofa, squeezing it to her chest with palpable excitement. There, you found a solution, Rose, Blanche drawled. A destination wedding. There are plenty of hotels here, and you can rent out a banquet hall for the reception. Rose took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. It'd be a great chance to prove that even though I live a fast-paced, glamorous Miami lifestyle, I'm still a St. Olaf girl through and through. Oh, I think you'll be able to tell somehow, Dorothy said, grinning. You'll do a wonderful job, I'm sure. And if the wedding's here and we're all going to attend, I, for one, will need something to wear. Who's up for a trip to adventure more? Ladies, first thing first. Before we decide on our outfits, we need to find dates, Blanche added, pushing up her seafoam green blazer sleeves. I met a charming doctor the other day. Maybe I'll telephone and ask him to be my +1. Dorothy leaned across the arm of chair to Blanche and put a hand on her knee. I just don't understand how you stumble into eligible men everywhere you go. Now, where did you meet a doctor? And more importantly, does he have a brother? Just recently, Dorothy had admitted to herself that she'd begun to dread attending even attending events alone. It would be nice to have someone new, and male to spend time with, other than the fellow residents of 6151 Richmond Street. Preferably someone handsome, educated, and interesting. Heck, she'd take 2 out of 3, or maybe even just 1. I suppose you could make an appointment to meet one, but I met this one in an elevator, Blanche said. You just have to put yourself out there. Go where the doctors are. I'm not going to hang around hospitals and emergency rooms just to meet a man, but thank you for the advice, Dorothy said. Maybe I'll try that VHS dating service my daughter was always going on about. She sent me this yesterday. She grabbed a plastic-wrapped video cassette and trifold brochure from the rattan coffee table and placed them on her lap. That sounds very technical, Rose said, furrowing her brow as she seated herself on the sofa. I'm not sure that humans can fall in love with machines. Oh, Rose, you don't date the video player, Dorothy laughed. You watch recordings of men talking about their interests, their personalities, and what they're looking for in a partner. Then you pick the ones you like, and the service connects the two of you, and you go on a date. Dorothy fanned through the brochure, which featured photos of happy couples playing tennis, smiling over pina coladas, and walking along a beach silhouetted by a candy-colored Florida sunset. Very sensible, Blanche said, nodding at the pictures, kind of like browsing the JCPenney catalog. Just make sure you meet in a public place and you don't get in his car or go to his apartment, Rose said, putting a hand over the brochure and looking at Dorothy with earnest intensity. You can't be too careful these days. I'll be careful, Rose. If I find anywhere suitable, I'll be sure to suggest lunch or coffee in a public place. Dorothy smiled. Though Rose was overcautious, one of the many benefits of living with her girlfriends was that they all kept an eye out for each other. They'd helped each other time and again, dealing with problems large and small. On good days, it was like having a bunch of close-knit sisters. On bad days, it was like having a fleet of nosy neighbors right inside your own home. See that you do. I need your help to plan this wedding, and I can't have you getting kidnapped. We simply have too much to do. Starting now. I need to scout some wedding venues and find out their pricing. Rose stood up and gathered her purse. A Miami wedding is sure to be much more expensive than a St. Olaf one, and I'll need to find a place for the St. Olafians to stay. Good idea, Blanche said, also getting up and pulling her purse from the hall closet. I'll come with you. Maybe I could sweet talk some of those venues into giving you a discount. Wonderful. We have no time to waste, Rose said, picking up her purse from an end table and heading toward the front door. As Blanche rose to join her, she waved at Dorothy. Enjoy sitting here alone watching videos of single men. Dorothy laughed. You make it sound so tawdry. It's simply more of a modern way of dating. Rose stopped before opening the front door and turned back to Dorothy somberly. Just don't bring a man back to the house, not until you're sure about him. Unless he's really good looking, Blanche added, lifting her eyebrows and wiggling her shoulders. Then absolutely bring him over. You think I'm being silly, Rose said, her forehead creasing in worry. But what if this man is the next Ted Bunderson? Don't you mean Ted Bundy? Dorothy chuckled, leaning back in her chair. No, I mean Ted Bunderson. He dated my best friend Ingrid back in St. Olaf. After every date, he asked to come inside for a glass of water or to use the bathroom. That's not a crime, Blanche said. What if he really liked her and didn't want the date to end? Rose leaned conspiratorial toward Blanche. Her voice fell into a whisper. Well, every time she let him inside, she noticed something missing from her curio cabinet the next day. Turned out he was stealing her miniature ceramic cow figurines. Not the cow figurines, Dorothy said, clasping her hands together in mock horror. She softened her expression in a comforting smile for Rose. I promise I won't bring anyone like that into our house. Plus, everyone using the tapes has been screened by the dating company. She tapped a section of the small print at the back of the brochure. It says here, right under the money-back guarantee, that each user will get at least one compatible match from using the service and that all applicants are vetted. Rose peered over Dorothy's shoulder and squinted at the fine print. Well, if they've all been to the vet, at least they have all the shots. Somehow placated, Rose nodded silently. After Rose and Blanche left, Dorothy placed the brochure back in her lap and thought about that money-back guarantee. She wished finding love were as simple as picking out a new television set. If it broke, you can get it repaired, or get a brand new one to replace it. It hadn't worked out that way for her in the relationships at all. But if she didn't find Prince charming from these videos, Dorothy thought to herself, maybe that would be okay. She wouldn't let hope run away with her. She'd readjust her expectations and use the service to look for Mr. Pleasant enough to be a decent wedding date.